Hi, Valley Fourth Church. Welcome to our Community Connection. I'm Pastor Josh with Pastor Joe, of course, and we want to talk to you about a new sermon series starting this Sunday. Also want to wish everyone a happy Mother's Day weekend, whenever you may be watching this. And we're actually starting the new series this Sunday, right?
That's right. This Sunday we start a new series going through the epistle to the Colossians. So it's already been a thrilling study for me. There's a lot to discover and apply to our walk today. It's a fascinating epistle.
Do you have a title or a theme that has emerged so far in your study?
I think the theme that underlies it, I've put into a phrase, the incomparable Christ. Colossians is one of the most, if you will, Christocentric epistles in the New Testament. It contains a tremendous amount of deep teaching about who Jesus is as God. Ephesians is a companion to it in many ways. Ephesians talks about Christ as the head of the church and supreme over his people. Colossians talks about Christ as being supreme over creation, Almighty God, and also the only one we need in salvation. So just the incomparable Christ. I mean, he is incomparable, and this epistle brings it out.
For sure. I know you were thinking for a number of weeks about what to teach on. Maybe tell us what led you to Colossians.
Just, going through a lot of different meditation points in the New Testament, my heart kept being drawn back there. I think also that there's a tremendous amount of need for emphasizing the clear nature and identity of Jesus in the Christian culture today.
Yeah.
I think there's of course there are a lot of invented ideas about Christ in the secular culture, but there's also, I think, quite a bit of flawed teaching going through the broad Christian culture today about Christ. And just as in our time, in the Colossian time, they were battling with flawed teaching. Yeah. And that teaching was beginning to threaten that church. In fact, that's the reason Paul wrote Colossians. He received a messenger from the church at Colossae. Paul was in prison in his first imprisonment in Rome and receiving visitors, and the teacher of that church, the man that had started it, went all the way to Rome. It was a 1,000-mile journey to meet with the Apostle Paul out of his concern for the false teachings that were beginning to invade his church. And so Paul wrote Colossians in a response to the false teaching that was threatening that church. So it's a great epistle to understand the greatness of Christ and the true nature of who he is. And so always wanting to bring... The greatest way to protect yourself from falsehood is to continually, be immersed in what?
Yeah, in the truth.
In the truth.
Yeah. No, that's great. So that's obviously a big theme, is Christ, the true Christ. Are there any other themes or interesting things that have popped out to you in your early study of the book?
I think it's interesting that this epistle is like so many of the Pauline epistles. Ephesians and Philippians come to mind that are in fact that were written at the same time, quite frankly, I think. That divide into two dimensions. The first is doctrinal understanding and truth, and we see that in chapter 1 all the way through chapter 2, where he answers the heresies. And chapter 1, verse 15, launches into his great study of Christ, where he talks about Jesus, is the image of the invisible God, the firstborn of all creation. Then he moves into this exalted teaching about Christ's authority over creation and his power in salvation. And so that sweeps all the way through the first two chapters. And then Paul begins to shift, as he often does in these epistles, from the doctrinal to the practical, from the greatness of truth that drives us to the nobility of life that should come out of us because we know him. Yeah. And he begins the shift in chapter 3, verse 1. If then, in identifying a change in the movement of his thinking, if then you've been raised with Christ, seek the things that are above where Christ is, seated at the right hand of God. And 2 verses later, in verse 5, he begins to talk about living that out, or actually letting Christ live out through us in the new man, the new kind of life you ought to have if you know Christ as God.
Yeah.
And so there's the doctrinal, the practical, as a teacher.
They go together,
They always do. And a lot of our teaching today, unfortunately, is so driven to the relevant point that a lot of teachers and pastors split these epistles and they start teaching from the back end, about what to do or what to know, instead of going all the way through as it was written and going through the great truths that are the basis of a great life. So that's one thing that I saw in high relief as I studied it so far.
Yeah, a lot of good application there. And
there is.
Part and,
but we don't. I don't think we go astray when we think about what to do for Christ so much as we begin to go astray when we become misinformed about what He's done for us.
Certainly a real danger even in today's world.
In today's world,
I think
is.
I think you're right on that.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, that's a great thing to look forward to for our people. Maybe you would even read Colossians. Only 4 chapters, right?
It's
not a long read to sit
not
down
a long read.
and read. Maybe even glance at it weekly and just kind
You
of
bet.
think about it and pray about that. So
Yeah.
excited about that. Another big thing to be anticipating this weekend, besides Mother's Day and the new sermon series, is our new chairs.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. The new seating in the worship center is going to be actually placed tomorrow. The carpets are being cleaned, of course, and everything just made spotless and ready. And then, so this Sunday will be our first Sunday with new worship seating, which we hope will be enable our sanctuary, our worship center, to be a place of ongoing ministry and the work of Christ in lives for decades to come.
Yes.
So.
Yeah, and we appreciate all the work. Many of you helped us on Sunday and a few even later in the week with this project, so appreciate your help with that. But it's still normal service times, right? 9 and 10:30?
9 and 10:30, and we look forward to having you be with us. We stream at 10:30 for the 10:30 service as well, and it should be a day of celebration and a day of beginning in the preaching and maybe even in the experience of what it's like to be in the worship center.
Awesome.
So.
Well, very good. Well, we hope to see you Sunday at 9 or 10:30. We'll see you then.